next, I'd like to bring in Doug Lynn. You guys that were here with us from the beginning, you guys, everyone, you met Doug earlier. He kind of took us through that simulated attack. Now he's going to talk about the rest of the story. So we've presented a lot of solutions. We're going to take you through the rest of that story with Chase, and he's going to talk about, even more specifically, he's going to hit a couple of things like some more data protection scenarios, and even a little bit deeper into the endpoint scenarios. And I think he'll kind of bring everything together as we go from Doug's presentation into our panel, which will round out the day. So Doug, can you hear me?
I gotcha.
Loud and clear. You look good, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I'll let you take it away.
Sounds like a plan. So one of the first things that we wanted to do today is kind of walk through the anatomy of a hack, and really anatomy of hacks in general, because there are a lot of commonalities. So it was actually Lockheed Martin who first instantiated this. This is the cybersecurity kill chain. And through a lot of research, most of the researchers have found that there is a set of commonalities that most attacks go through. And this is kind of our version of what it looks like. But everything starts with recon, weaponization, delivery, exploit, install, command, and control. And those last three are really kind of key because they're cyclical. So that's where we see lateral movement, the internal recon, and then establishing stronghold. When the attacker, the threat actor, has enough information, then it goes to command and control, exfiltration, and that aspect of it as well. So if we dig into each of these scenarios a little bit more, recon and weaponization, I've been an admin for 20 plus years of my life, so I'm very used to that point of view. And unfortunately, from an admin point of view, this part of the kill chain is abstracted. We don't see it. We don't have any kind of idea it's there. We're on the receiving end of it. So the weaponization, the recon, we don't see as much of this, namely because those attacks are getting extremely sophisticated. If we do have systems put into play where, we see some external, port scans or something, more than likely they're going to fall up and they're going to creep up as noise. And when we're trying to deliver an app or get, some kind of attack in there, we're not necessarily going to be attacking the technology. We're going to be attacking the people. And I actually heard a story recently where most of the recon that actually happens for spear phishing is LinkedIn, because we actively push all of our information there. So now that we've done that recon, we've got a package, we've got a delivery method, or we've got a weaponization of it, we need to deliver it. So in our hack, we had three different ways to do that. We had an inbound phishing mail, which was successful. We had a doc download that was built off of that. And something we didn't see around the hood is once we were able to get those credentials, what we started doing was spewing out email to, other people in the organization. And I saw a story last night, or an article last night, where 90% of all delivery methods are going to be phish email. And the biggest reason why that is it works. People are very easy to hack. They are very easy to consume it. The analogy that I heard was, why try and fight through the moat and beat up the wall when I can just ask to be let in and people are going to let me in? When it comes to exploitation, the next phase in the cycle, there's two things that we need to know. Number one, exploitation cannot exist without vulnerability. The other thing is not all vulnerabilities are technical. So when an exploitation is successful, from a hacker point of view, that's cause to celebrate. We've got our foot in the door. We've got injections into there. It may not be persistent, but we have succeeded in kind of that first main phase. Unfortunately, this also is a reverse celebration on the organization side, because from the org perspective, we have failed to prevent a weaponized attack, and we don't have visibility to it. Ahmad was just saying that the 90 to 180 days, depending on that time frame, and I've seen even as high as up to 220 in various different reports, is the amount of time a hack can go undetected in all of the environment. So it's there. We know it's there. We're going to plan for it to be there. What can we do about this? And we're going to dig more into this in a future slide, but this is hard, and being in that next gen AV, being in the EDR space, it's all about watching behaviors, because oftentimes, and we've seen this before, we've been watching, scrolling through Facebook, scrolling through, YouTube, a malicious ad pops in, and boom, all of a sudden we're, blacked out, or there's some actions happening without the interaction of the user. On the flip side of that, exploitation is also really easy to manage, because go to number one, exploitation cannot exist without vulnerability. If we can patch everything constantly, keep it up to date, know what's in the environment, and I agree that is daunting in an undertaking, but if we can keep up to date, we can limit that exploitation surface because we eliminate the vulnerabilities coming out of there. All an exploit though does is get a foot in the door. It's not the last step in any way, shape, or form. So the main goal that a hacker is trying to do at this stage is repeatability, is persistence. If I have something running in memory on a system, it's exploited, great. If I reboot that box, I'm done. So installation is the next phase, and this is kind of the start of that kill chain loop that we'll talk through. But really, it's getting repeatable framework that I can access, that I can get access to, that I can run, remote commands on. I want to maintain stealth. I want to keep out of sight, and I want to make sure that I can get in there persistently as much as we can. Quite frankly, most of the security tech that we see, that we've embraced, that we know, lives and breathes on detecting, preventing the installation frameworks. That's where everything is. However, we know it's not foolproof. For the EDR, they said we can block 100% today, 99.9% tomorrow. There is a constant evolution here that we need to keep up to date on. Last part, or next to the last part in the kill chain, is command and control. And just like automation, just like enterprises, automation is key. So we can run in an automated fashion attacks that are self-governing, self-controlled, and they provide a very fast, efficient way to get from point A to point B. But there's going to be hiccups along the way. So a lot of the modern hacks, they require adjustment. They require that command and control, that oversight and adjustments, that course corrections as we go through, just like modern enterprises. And C2, or command and control, is really where that begins. That's what kind of guides the attack, especially those deep entrenched attacks over time. We've also seen where C2 can provide meaningful visibility and guidance on the attacker space, and help monitor, the organization, or reverse monitor the organization to see, have they been detected, where have they been detected, and am I being stealthy enough to actually succeed here? So those three steps, they're not linear. They may progress naturally, but they're not necessarily linear, because even in the attack that I did, I had to pivot. I had to laterally move. I had to get around the environment in order to be successful with my exploit. So this cycle that we call it the lateral cycle, or lateralization. When we move from one machine to another, to another, to another to try and pivot, what we're trying to do is A, entrench as much as possible to keep our stronghold, B, find and be successful on our goals, and then work through that process. So most of the time, if in the case of Chase, he was a single user, single endpoint, nothing really special about that. He really had no access to things there. And from a hacker point of view, or from an attack point of view, it was a relatively low benefit target. There was nothing there other than I could compromise it. However, through hot pointing or pivots, being able to move to things using pass the hash, using other hacking tools that we have, we were actually able to A, get on a domain controller, B, get to that critical HR information that we were going for. Finally, the last thing we have is exfiltration. And I kind of mentioned this a couple of times. There's usually a handful of goals, or three main goals that most threat actors take. Monetization, hey, I can do this, I can make money doing it. The crypto locking, prime example of that. It's very easy, very simple to deploy something, put my key in there in order to get it. they're going to pay me money, and I can do this repetitively and build it. The data exfiltration or the insider threat, the theft point of view, you've got secrets. I want access to those secrets. Or the last goal can be just simply destruction or disruption. So DDoS, prime example. Infrastructure targets can be a prime example of this one. I think there was a hack in Ukraine where they were actually actively trying to interrupt, the power grid, is what that was. So if they've reached this point, they've reached the conclusion of their kill chain. They have this information. They're able to filter it. They're able to get that content, get that data. And typically at this point, this is where, the incident response chain comes into play, because at this point, they may know, they may not know, but this is where we start to get visibility. This is where we, see stuff pop on dark web. In aspects of it, we see things go offline. The actions are actually happening here. Hardest part about this is, again, that discovery time is, if we've discovered this, organization has a bad day. Coming from the admin side, lawyers get involved. It's not a pretty sight. There's definitely things here that we want to do. So back to the kill chain, kind of in a slightly different way, putting it up on edge a little bit. Recon and weaponization. Again, very little no visibility here. Oftentimes, this may be personnel, this may be LinkedIn, this may be something. So in terms of level of focus, not really something where we want to go here. However, that delivery, exploit, installation phase, we have a high level of influence here. And the nice part is we have a high level of proactive influence. There are things that we can do today without even, actors being in the environment, in order to help this cycle come through. Stuff like patching, keeping up to date, making sure we are good to go, modernizing the systems as much as possible, adding in MFA, adding in all of these kind of additional tools to help. These are proactive comments that we can do. At the same point, once an attacker is in, they start their internal recon, they start their lateral moves, our level of influence goes down, and it shifts because we are starting to become reactive. We may start to see alerts in SIM. We may start to see AV alerts come through. We're going to start to see things through. And for a point, we're basically going to be playing whack-a-mole in order to try and work through exactly what's going on in the environment. But we've changed from a proactive to a reactive standpoint. If we do get to the command and control, the exfiltration state, it's too late. Quite frankly, there's very, very little things that we can do, other than triage, try and shut it down. But most of the damage by this point has already been done. So remember Chase? Couple of what if questions here. And it's kind of the big one is, what if we have control points through the hack? Very first thing that I did was send an email. I grabbed credentials. I sent more emails on the side. Okta comes in. We add MFA into the licks. Now we can prevent that additional spread. We can prevent some of those aspects here by prompting for MFA. Even if I have credentials, I don't have the MFA. So I am going to be prevented potentially at that point of the attack. I'm not. I move on. Beyond Trust comes through. I've got this in the environment. This helps limit the local credential, the randomization of admin passwords. Being able to prevent privileged access to go through is also secure access, because I did exploit both of those. So this helps control at that point. So it's bringing something like a admin dismissal or admin de-evolution will come through and help here. Securians, governance, site. Part of that detection, part of that recon phase that I did as a hacker was to be able to go through and identify, what I had access to, where things were access to. So if I can do those reviews, if I can say, hey, Chase comes through, Chase is not in HR, he doesn't have HR access, and we're going to limit that, or even more so, he doesn't have access to this cloud user, to the other users. If we start seeing things pop up there, that's going to be a red flag. That's going to be something that we can go play whack-a-mole after and go identify. Proof point, the original inbound email was a phish email. Phishing is constant, literally constant to come through. So if we can prevent, or at least help prevent, that email coming through, and just block it at the source, or B, if it does slip through, can we do link rewrite? I did click a link. Can we do link rewrites to be able to, proactively or reactively go through and double check, hey, is this link safe? What is it actually attempting to do? Is it where we think we are? And Proofpoint will continue to do that and does that very, very well going forward. Lastly, from the EDR front, if something happens, we want it to see, we want it to be able to stop, we want to be able to control it at all of these different gates. And if we do get lateral movement, can we correlate that? Can we move it? Can we, prevent the EDR? Can we prevent the move from point A to point B? Or if we can't prevent the move, do we at least have visibility of what things were touched and when? How long have they been in the environment? How long has the server been compromised? For the EDR, great work at that. Ultimately, tools fail. And we've all seen this in some way, shape, or form, from the classic AV to next-gen AV, spam, email, everything on the security side is a constant evolution. Literally, it changes hour by hour, minute by minute. So what we've learned is tools fails. Can we expand, our tool set, the classic defense in depth? There's not one thing that's going to stop us. There's not one thing that's going to be great. It takes a village, and it takes a village of security, tools in order to help us out and be secure. People are easily hacked, way too easily hacked. Can we educate people? Can we work through those aspects? How can we, augment technology to help fill the void that people break? Most hacks are started that way. Constant updating game, the evolution there. And ultimately, every single company that I've ever been a part of has been impacted by data exfiltration in some way, shape, or form. Big, small, low, high, doesn't really matter. So kind of moving through and pivoting, can we do anything about exfiltration? So if you remember back to the hack, I was able to gather 2 special files that are HR dump, HR master list. So I grabbed those files, I removed them, I'm working in my own system. Let's dig in there. One of the file, standard CSV, standard file, nothing special, attack it. I opened it up, and lo and behold, I was able to pull information. Thankfully, not really great information out of here, but again, I was able to open this up. However, the other file, I actually had rights management, Microsoft Information Management, information protection as that file itself. So even though I had the file, I had the content, I was fully successful in my hack, I had everything outside of that I needed. This file was encrypted. It was encrypted within there, and I have to authenticate to the file. So when I brought this file, I took it out, took it home, I was playing with it, etc., looking to see the fruits of my labor, I was not able to access this file. So even though I had it, removed it, it was long out of the environment, I still could not get to it. So a little bit more around information protection. And information protection from Microsoft, really kind of 4 main things. Helps to prevent enterprise data leaks by classifying that content, by moving the rights management service, encrypting it at rest, and then being able to throw an authentication front door on the file itself. So location agnostic, even on employee-owned, BYO, files that are in the remote, etc. This does definitely help reduce employee frustrations. Traditional DLP can be a nightmare. Ask anybody that's ever tried to take a USB stick and bring it in play. Those DLP solutions are really going to block that out. It just increases frustration. Even after all of the identity work, trying to prevent that is tough. And DLP, or the Microsoft Information Protection, can help that going forward. It does help to maintain the ownership control of your data. Again, location agnostic. I don't care where that data is. We're still going to be protecting it. And we can also help to access and elevate data sharing, because everybody has to authenticate the file. Now we can actually say, if I'm going to give my HR to a contractor, to a vendor, to somebody else, it is explicit with login and password that I have governed through all of the previous, solutions that we talked about, to be able to say, this is who we are and this is what they are. So information protection, again, it's a suite of tools. It used to be called Rights Management Service. They've rebranded it a handful of things. They've actually started to bring in more and more information through here into the information protection umbrella. So from the content level, there are tools in Office 365 to automatically classify, tag, and report on usage. So if we find PII, if we find HIPAA information, if we have confidential or any kind of custom tags in there, we can actually automatically tag that information, be able to report on it, to be able to auto encrypt it, and be able to protect it wherever that content lives. We have the next thing is for DLP in flight. So if we, are emailing out something, if it's abnormal, if it's, matching a policy or whatever, if we find content like more than 4 or 5, kind of the typical DLP type items, but if we find more than 4 or 5 social security numbers, anything like that, that's going to be flagged, and we can perform an action like encryption, like block, like send to a manager for authorization, be able to redirect those actions from an email perspective, but as well as content sharing, being able to just collaborate with other people in general. We've got content control at the endpoint, which is kind of the next thing I want to talk about. But then from a CASB perspective, there are also apps and insights to say, where does this content go? Where does this data go? Who is shared, where it's shared, and how it's shared? So the most recent addition is the WIP component of Microsoft Information Protection, and that's baked into Windows itself. They've had this in iOS and Android for a while. They've started to bring it into Mac for a control point, and now it's baked into the Windows apps itself. So what this does is this eliminates the ability, or eliminates the requirement to set specific governing policies around devices, and really starts to kind of take that identity-based control of content moving forward. And this policy follows the user, it follows the data wherever it goes, and it follows the apps that they're going to be rolling into. And specific rights and features, I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times, just kind of want to explain what they are. Typically, when we think of a file, if I have a file, if I grab a file on USB, I pretty much have full ubiquitous access to it. So everything around being able to read, copy, print, etc., those are all rights that are in the file. So data access, copy and paste, print, screen capture, save location, encryption, and the ability to time bomb or selective wipe. These are the rights, the specific actions that we can take on a very granular level that is both location and user context aware. So if we have a file, in case of our HR master list, I can say that if it's within the context of the firewall, so to speak, if it's within the company, we can perform an action. If it's outside of the company, perform another action. If this gets shared, if it's not authenticated, go ahead and block full access. These policies are very, very easily applied through any MDM, but in the realm of Intune, they're extremely fast, extremely easy to configure, and again, they are multiple devices can be attached by one policy. There we go. They're device agnostic. So when we create the app protection policies, we create it for iOS, for Android, for Mac, for Windows, but mainly it's controlled by that single user identity. Last thing I wanted to say here was kind of as a very, very quick wrap up. This slide was earlier too, and it's true, turning silos into solutions. Oftentimes when we think about security and security vendors, security products, it's going to be, okay, I'm going to get an AV from over here. I'm going to get a DLP solution from over here. I'm going to get a next-gen component from over here. I'm going to get an email from over here. I'm going to get, all of these different silos. But ultimately, as a security solution, the only way that we can be even mildly successful about preventing those security breaches is if we have a holistic property, a holistic view of what that security infrastructure is going to look like. And here at Alchemy, we've spent our careers trying to build, valid solutions. And with the solutions presented today, I think it goes a long way to a really good story. And with that, thank you.
Very good, Doug. A lot of content. You rolled through that pretty quick. I'll give you a second, but show must go on. So a couple questions. Yeah, so the MIP controls that you talked about, the question was, do they extend beyond Windows devices, such as iOS, Android, Linux, Macs? I think you touched on that, but
yeah, we did briefly touch on that one. So iOS and Android, the app policies are absolutely there. Mac, the app policy is there. Windows, the app policy is there. Linux, not so much, because they've got a really hard time opening up Excel on Linux at the moment. And usually most people are not as worried about that from that perspective, because the content collaboration, the number of people, the number of devices using that is just simply low.
Gotcha. Okay. This is a question from me, because I want to ask this for the audience, but can you extend Microsoft information protection out to non-cloud, right? So to on-prem data?
We can. Yep. Yep, so we can. So there's a couple of ways to do that. There are connectors that we can bring in play. The biggest one being either SharePoint or content in file shares. So with modern file shares, 2016 and above, I'm pretty sure, or 2012 or 2 and above, there's some components that we can add there. There's an add-in to do the classification that will automatically add the information protection rights via classification rules to on-prem files.
Okay. And actually, that's a real good segue, because it leads to the last question I see is on information protection. How much of a ramp up time is there for, to go through the whole design phase, deploy phase, and then, overall adoption for an enterprise?
So overall adoption, we really want to push a phased approach. So there's really two main controls that we want to put in play. Number one is who has access to the content. So even if there was only a single control for MIP that goes in play, really it's, hey, if we take all of our content and we mark it as company owned only, you have to authenticate to that file. That ramp up is actually very, very fast. There's very little to do there. The more information for, the automated classifications, adding ICD-10 codes, for example, or adding in specific keywords, that's going to take a little bit more time just to get the policy correct. But from an implementation time, it's actually relatively quick.
Okay. That's good. And then just so that you're aware, I know you're, mid-stroke presenting here, but there's a comment out there. It was good to hear the mention of how AIP fits in with Defender ATP and some of the other products. So good job of showing, holistically how all that stuff maps back together, and, just bringing it home with the overall protection strategy. Microsoft's obviously come a long way with a lot of their products.